Hi everyone, how are you all doing today? Now, before we get on to the pleasantries of this big video, I would just like to take a second to warn people as to what the content of this video is about. This is an in-depth critique of the entirety of Fallout 4, meaning that if you have not already been spoiled or figured out major plot points yet, you are advised not to watch the rest of the video, and instead play the game yourself to avoid being spoiled. I am going in-depth with everything in the game, including the main story. Also, those of you who would rather not hear negative opinions about Fallout 4, I would request that you turn around now. I have some positive and negative things to say about the game, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear the negative things, and if you're one of those people, you're not going to like your time. With that done, allow me to introduce myself. My name is MisterCaption. I am a huge Fallout fan. I have been playing Fallout since the release of Fallout New Vegas. I bought it on accident, and I have loved Fallout as a franchise ever since. Shortly after I bought Fallout New Vegas and played the hell out of it, I bought Fallout 3. And a few years after that, I bought Fallout 1 and 2. And over time, my opinions of Fallout have kind of matured into what they are now, and I only say the things I'm about to say because I really love Fallout, because Fallout is a very good universe and a very good game franchise. I would argue only 2 games out of this entire franchise so far were really bad. And I want to see Fallout be the best thing it can ever be. I don't say any of the things I say because I hate Bethesda, or I hate Fallout, or anything like that. I am actually not a hater of Bethesda at all, despite what some people might think of me. I do like Bethesda. I played Morrowind a long time ago, and I really liked Morrowind. Also, just in case anybody would like to make the "you're not a game developer, you don't know anything about game development" argument at all during this review, I actually do know something about Fallout game development. I am an avid Fallout modder. I have over 300-something hours in the game, and I would like to personally brag about my ability to pretty much make anything in the game. Even if it is easy to use, these mod tools, I know all about them. So I actually know how Fallout works on an internal level. I know how the creation engine and the Gamebryo engine work under the hood, which should help me, hopefully make me seem a little bit more credible in your eyes as you continue on to this review. So with that out of the way, allow me to continue to the review. Now, originally, I wanted to keep this video all about the content in the game. I didn't want to get into any of the technical aspects of Fallout 4's release, but I cannot, in good faith, make the rest of this video without at least putting a little bit of a warning about this game, because it is very broken. There are a lot of glitches. None of them have broken the game for me yet, but some of them will kill you, especially the one where occasionally, randomly, when you aim down sights, you will fly to the side, which can send you off of cliffs, it can send you high up into the air. It will kill you, and there are a variety of other glitches, such as companions not functioning properly, getting stuck, and insane graphical stuff that will... it's pretty bad. That's all I have to say. Now that we're on to the review proper, let's start where all things do, at the beginning. I'm just going to come out and say now, but the introduction to Fallout 4 is woefully rushed. It tries to introduce us to a variety of characters that they really want us to be invested in, but we only have a very short time to do it. Now, I am all for shorter, if introductions to video games, because I don't want to have to go through a slog every time I make a new character. But I think honestly you should time your introduction based on how many different things you're trying to introduce to a player at once. As far as introducing the entire concept and background of Fallout, the new half live action thing they did works beautifully, and even though I know all of this already and it's kind of a drag to hear it, for somebody who's never heard it, it's probably going to be a very good introduction. As far as the actual playable introduction goes, again, it goes by far too fast. We don't get any time to soak up any of the scenery or the characters that we're trying to be introduced to, and you really just can't get invested in anybody. Especially not your wife. Your wife gets one conversation with you before you have to evacuate to the vault, the entire conversation being a single dialogue choice. But of course, before we do any of that Vault escape stuff, we have to talk to the Vault Tech representative. The Vault Tech representative is our first character that we engage in dialogue with, and allow me to take a second now to actually talk about the dialogue system in Fallout 4. Fallout 4's dialogue system is not something I have ever been interested in, nor is it something I am interested in after having played the game. If there's one thing that I didn't expect from this dialogue system it's just that it's very boring. I never really get invested in anything my player character is saying because I don't know what I'm going to say before I say it. And even if I did, a lot of the dialogue that comes out of the player's mouth in this game is not very interesting. Sometimes it's just a single affirmative or a yes to something, and that's it. But aside from that, the dialogue system itself is just inherently flawed, because it doesn't give you the proper amount of information that you need to make a single decision, or an informed one at all. Here, let me play you some footage of a dialogue option I had midway through the game. Keep in mind, the only information I got about this dialogue option was that I was going to be sarcastic to Valentine.
Hey, Valentine.
Hope you got what you were looking for inside my head. That was right. I should have killed you when you were on ice.
You want to try for round 2? Let's go!
What? What are you talking about?
Yelling at somebody and trying to start a fight doesn't seem like a very sarcastic thing to do, does it? And that right there highlights one of the major problems I have with this dialogue system, is that just the lack of information that you're given as a player means you can't make an informed choice, and it means that things can just happen that you weren't prepared for. I didn't know I was going to try to threaten him to kill him when I was making a sarcastic option, and I wouldn't have known that because I didn't know what I was going to say. Now, this little example is fairly isolated. There weren't too many other instances of this happening, but there are certainly times where I say something that I didn't think I was going to say. It could have been a lot worse, surely, but it's still not acceptable considering the New Vegas and Fallout 3 method of doing it provided all the information you needed and allowed for more interesting character dialogue because the player knew what they were going to say. You could make an informed decision about the kind of character you wanted to play out because you knew exactly what you were going to say from the dialogue list. It would have been an incredibly easy thing to fix, too. All they would have to do is list out all the dialogue, but instead we got this generic BioWare system where they just give you a little bit of a descriptive word to kind of generally tell you what you're going to say. But with all of that aside, after talking to the Vault-Tec representative, we get our first bit of character creation. We distribute our special stats. Now, I will be talking about the rest of the character development later, but for now, let me just say what I actually like about this first little bit. Fallout 3 and New Vegas always had a problem with distributing way too many special points at the beginning of the game. You had 5s and everything, and then you had 5 points to distribute wherever you wanted. Basically, you could have stats maxed out without having to minimize any, and I really like the idea of giving players fewer special points at the start to make it so each one's a little bit more meaningful and characters are more well-defined. After we develop our character, we start to get the warning that the bombs are dropping, which goes to highlight how insanely quick this introduction goes by. Once we get these warnings, our door opens up and we start to head towards the vault. After a little bit of a cinematic romp through our small little town, we make it inside of the vault, and once we actually get to the top of the vault proper, we see probably the stupidest thing in this entire game's storytelling. The idea of our player character surviving a nuclear bomb that close is probably the stupidest thing ever written in the entirety of Fallout. I don't know how many of you know how nuclear weapons work, but nuclear weapons pretty much vaporize anything within a certain range of their detonation, and we are well within that range. And even if we were not within the vaporization range, we would still get burnt to a crisp and be blinded by the initial detonation. Yet the player character, the baby, and his wife all come out unscathed, not to mention all of the other vault dwellers that were on this little thing with us. Everybody else seems to have died, though, but because we had a small little inch of concrete ahead of us, we're alright. But all nuclear plot armor aside, after this, our character finally makes it into Vault 111, one of my favorite parts of this whole game. It's an incredibly brief visit into the vault, but I really like the atmosphere they set up here, where everything's a little bit uncanny and things are just kind of creepy, especially with the Vault-Tec representatives and the employees, who don't seem to be very apt at answering questions and just constantly kind of say things that just don't really make sense 100%. They're very reassuring in a kind of creepy way, which is exactly how I always thought of Vault-Tec. They put on this mask of reassurance and safety, but really they're a sinister force that's just trying to undermine everything. Towards the end of our short Vault-Tec visit, we get to see essentially the highlight of what's wrong with this short introduction. In the cryogenic pod, our wife is killed, and I don't know about you, but I was not invested in her death or her character at all. You only get to see her for a single dialogue option and maybe 10 or 11 minutes, and then she just dies. It's like if in Fallout 3 you did the bit with your dad going through Vault 101, and he just got shot right outside of the vault. It's ridiculous how quick this goes by. And with all that finally out of the way, we emerge from the vault and get a good look at the Commonwealth Wasteland. Now that the introduction is out of the way, there's one last thing I want to talk about it before we move on to other aspects of the game, and that's the immense amount of hand-holding that goes on with the player character's story. In this game, not only are you just a vault dweller, but you're also a military veteran of some sort. You have a spouse. If you're a man, then your wife is a law major, and if you're a woman, you are a law major, and your spouse is a veteran. You have a child who is a boy. You have a Mr. Handy. You live in a very specific neighborhood. It's pretty much all spelled out for you. Let me contrast it with all of the player character backstory we're given in Fallout 1. In Fallout 1, we are a resident of Vault 13, and always have been. There's nothing more to it. It's just that. The reason I really don't like this whole holding hands kind of thing for the backstory is that in Fallout, we have always been able to make our own characters, right? We have always had the total freedom to make our characters whatever we want to be. We were always able to be whoever we wanted to be. It's like a tabletop RPG. You can make up whatever you want. Now, it's true a lot of RPGs have characters that are already preset, but Fallout is not one of them. One of Fallout's strengths is the fact that the player character can be anyone, come from anywhere, and do anything while they're in the world. The player freedom of Fallout is one of its greatest aspects, and there's just not so much of that with the player backstory in this one. It's very handholdy. Perhaps not as handholdy as Fallout 3, which gave you your exact age, but it's really not great. They could have very easily just started us off as being cryogenically frozen, or had us come into the Commonwealth Wasteland another way, but they didn't, and now we have this huge backstory for ourselves that we can't really fickle around with. We can't maneuver it much. We can't be a part of any post-war factions. We are stuck being a veteran who was frozen for 200 years. That's all we'll ever be. But now that the introduction is out of the way, there's a lot of things we can talk about because we've been introduced to a lot of different things. I'm going to make a little quick save here right before Sanctuary Hills, and we'll take a little detour to go ahead and talk about the game's combat. The combat in Fallout 4 is no less than a marked improvement over the previous two entries in the series. Not only do things just work a lot better, but we have new added functionality such as sprinting and a grenade hotkey, as well as weapon bashing. All weapons have a much greater feel of a weight to them than they did in the previous games, with recoil now being an actual part of it. And it is all just an upgrade to the modern standard of first-person shooter gameplay. With not only that, but there are some new re-additions to the game that are very welcome, such as the differentiation of damage into 4 different damage types, and new advanced enemy AI, which makes them actually seek cover and use grenades more frequently, and it's all a much better package than it was before. Before we had this kind of half-assed shooting system, which, at best had aim-down sights and not much else, but now it's a fully-fledged shooter experience, and it's really nice, it feels good, and I'm glad to see it actually get up to the modern standard. There's a couple of more things I want to talk about, and one of them is definitely the balance of the game, which is now more quick and action-packed than it was before. Most damage sources between enemies that are about the same level are going to deal a lot more damage than they have in the previous games. Some enemies will only take a couple of shots to kill, and sometimes you will too, though not nearly as often. This makes it so that when enemies do bullet sponge, it's a lot more frustrating, because they'll be dealing a ton of damage to you, and you're getting used to dealing a ton of damage to all enemies. Then here comes somebody who takes multiple magazines to the head to kill, and it can be a very frustrating experience to have to deal with an enemy like that. This is specifically one of the reasons I actually avoided doing melee combat on my first and even second character, because I just didn't think it was viable at all to really do. I didn't get enough damage out, and I just was taking far too much. So it seems like the game is definitely more invested in its shooting than anything else. And yes, before anybody asks, I did try a strength 10 character, and I still feel this way. The new and both not new addition of having multiple damage sources is another thing I wanted to talk about, because it is a thing I really enjoyed and hope stays with the series from now on. There's now 5 different types of damage if you include radiation, which frankly I don't normally, but for the purposes of the video I will. There is ballistic damage, which comes from normal guns and physical impact, hitting things, stuff like that. There's energy damage, which is done from energy weapons, things like shock batons, laser rifles, laser muskets, plasma. You know what an energy weapon is. There's now poison damage, which is a damage over time effect that certain weapons and certain bug enemies have. And there's also cryo damage, which comes from certain cryo weapons, such as the Cryolator. Now, as far as balance is concerned, poison damage is the stupidest thing ever because it can kill you in one hit through a stim pack, at least on very hard mode, for me. But other than that, they're all pretty much even. The only real difference between some of these damage types, especially energy and ballistic, is that certain armor just protects better against one or the other. I haven't been able to observe any serious differences between them other than that. These new damage types allow for an interesting new mechanic, which is these legendary weapons, which can drop from certain legendary enemies. Now, the legendary weapons themselves are very much like enchanted weapons from Skyrim. They'll have some kind of special name and some kind of special effect on them, such as deals damage over time, or deals extra damage per shot, or deals extra damage to these enemies. This also happens on armor, by the way. Now, the legendary enemies themselves, I think, are kind of a missed opportunity of some description, because they're not handled very well. Basically, all the legendary enemies in this game are enemies with better stats that when they hit a certain health point, when they get to like 40% HP, they just heal back to maximum, and that's kind of it. The spawning of these enemies is linked to your difficulty, which I think is kind of cool, but frankly, these enemies are more just kind of a nuisance than they are an actual challenge. You just have to damage them down to a certain point, and then do it again and kill them. That's the entire strategy. There's nothing new or interesting about them. They don't have any different tactics. They're just kind of boring, which I think is a serious missed opportunity for something that could have been really, really cool. Now, the legendary weapons that I had just talked about are kind of neat. These come from these legendary enemies, and they're just basically an extra little effect onto a basic weapon that you already have. Unique weapons have their own special effects too, but these legendary items are far more frequent, and you're going to be seeing it more here than you are in the uniques. There's not much to say about it, other than that it is, just a neat little gimmick to add onto your gun, but some of them can be very, very powerful, so you want to be looking out for certain ones more than others based on your kind of what you want to be doing. It also makes it so you might switch out weapons contextually based on what kind of enemies you're fighting, which can be very interesting, especially if you don't have ammo for that weapon and you'll have to use something subpar. Melee combat, on the other hand, is kind of made as sort of lateral move, if anything. Blocking is now more interesting and takes more skill because it's more of a parry system than it was before, but as far as actual attacking goes, it's still pretty much just mashing the attack key. It's not much different, except that it's a little bit slower and has more weight to it, and that's kind of it. It's still just spamming left click with the occasional right click here and then whenever, you need to block. But other than that, it's clear to see that the combat is a lot better than it was in the previous games. Considering most of these games is ranged combat, then it's glad to see that that got a lot of love. The only real problems I have with the combat, which may not be with the combat, but they have a lot to do with it, is the fact that at higher difficulties, enemy HP is basically just too high. Most enemies will become serious bullet sponges, and it's incredibly annoying to have to waste an entire magazine pumping it into their heads, waiting for them to just fall over. It's a lot better than it was in New Vegas and 3, but it's still a problem here. Another thing, everything under very hard difficulty actually has the opposite problem, where things will die incredibly quickly within just a few shots, even on hard mode. So there's some kind of weird difficulty spike between hard and very hard that gives enemies a lot more HP than it needs to. I think a little bit of rebalancing with how tough enemies are in this might have made it a little bit more of an enjoyable experience for me. Of course, I would have loved to have been able to increase the difficulty of the game by going into hardcore mode, but hardcore mode, along with a couple of other things we'll talk about later, is strangely absent from this game, despite being one of the things I think people said was a unanimously good decision, simply because if you didn't like it, you didn't have to play it. Now, there are some inklings of hardcore mode kind of leaking into the normal game, such as all healing now being done over time, but the absence of an actual hardcore mode that had you worrying about 3 different new resources, health, sleep, and drink, is really, really depressing and disappointing to see, because it was such a simple thing in New Vegas that a lot of people liked, and it added a lot of replayability to the game, but strangely for Fallout 4 it's just missing. I also don't see any reason as to why this couldn't have been included with the game's release. It was something that was done within a year and a half for Fallout New Vegas, and here it seems like it would have been an even easier thing to implement considering all the code was already there. This is, in fact, just a better version of the creation engine, which is just a better version of the engine New Vegas was working with. So some of the tactics used to make that probably could have been handed over. And unfortunately, like I said, this is the first in a series of things that have been removed from the game that we will be talking about later. So, you guys remember that quick save we made a while ago? Why don't we load that up and continue on with the main quest? The next place we go on our main quest is to Sanctuary Hills, our old neighborhood back before everything got blown up. Now things are blown up, and Codsworth is here to introduce to us the fact that everything has now been blown up. We tell him that Sean and our wife are missing and dead, and he suggests we go to the nearby town of Concord to look at him, because there are people there who have, quote, barely shot at him. We make our way towards Concord, but on the way we get to meet a friendly little fellow who you may have all recognized. Here at this Red Rocket gas station, we meet our good old friend Dogmeat, as we all know him. Everybody loves him. He's from Fallout 1, 2, and 3, and now he's back for 4. Now, some of you, like me, might be cold-hearted evil bastards and just wanted to kind of kill Dogmeat because you didn't want to see him in another Fallout game, or for whatever reason you wanted to shoot Dogmeat. Let's try to do that now. Now, there was something in that footage that I wanted you to notice, and I don't know if everybody picked up on it, but you may have seen that Dogmeat never aggroed, even though I shot him 140 times. But don't you worry, this is not an isolated incident. After we make our way through Concord and fight a couple of raiders, we get to meet Preston Garvey's crew, and guess what? This right here demonstrates one of the greatest problems I have with Fallout 4. It has almost no player freedom in the main quest. There are a shit ton of essential NPCs. Just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this is, we have so far in this video met 7 non-hostile NPC characters. We can't kill 6 of them. Now, proportionally, that's a big number, and it's one of the main problems I have with Fallout 4. It has a very Bethesda level of essential NPCs, which limits your character freedom and how you can progress through the game the way you want. In Fallout New Vegas, there was one essential NPC, Yes Man, and he was only essential so that you could complete the game. You could kill pretty much, well, not pretty much, literally every other character in the entire game. And there were no essential characters in Fallout 1 and 2. Even the original Vault 13 Overseer can get shot in the back. Fallout 3 and 4 are the only games in this entire franchise to be pulling this extensive amount of essential characters crap. Now, I'm not saying those two games have something in common, but they were both made by Bethesda, and it's not something that Bethesda seems to have evolved from since Fallout 3. It really needs to stop. Fallout is a franchise about going around being able to do whatever you want. That is the main core awesome thing about Fallout. That is the drive behind everything, is that you can do whatever you want. It's the player freedom that people enjoy so much, and this is not player freedom. I want to be able to shoot Dogmeat. I can't shoot Dogmeat. Can't shoot Preston Garvey. I can't shoot anybody. I have to follow through the character and the plot the way they want me to until they allow me to get to a point where I can shoot them. And that's if they ever do that. And if you want to see how bad this lack of player freedom actually gets, here's some footage of somebody opening a fucking door for me like this is Battlefield.
I got it. But I hear big fat footsteps on the other side. Once we step through this door, get ready for anything.
I can accept a couple of essential characters here and there, alright? You know, you get it. Sometimes they just need to happen. Maybe they're essential to the plot in some way, and you couldn't design a way around the plot without them. You didn't want to make an alternate way to do a quest. Whatever. But the day you tell me I can't open up my own doors is when we have a problem, Bethesda. I'm a big boy. A lot of the people playing Fallout are big boys too. We can all open our doors together. We don't need you to do it for us. And hell, if you really wanted, you could have just locked the thing and had us do the lockpicking ourselves instead of having this jackass do it for us. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and reload a save and talk to Preston Garvey to move along with the main quest. After our conversation with Preston Garvey, we go up onto the roof of the building and get a suit of power armor and a minigun. I'm going to let that one speak for itself and just continue on to the part where we fight some more raiders and a Deathclaw and then take the entire gang and go back to Sanctuary Hills. While in Sanctuary Hills, we finally get to play around with one of the most advertised aspects of Fallout 4. We finally get to go ahead and play around with the town building. Now, I'll be honest, this whole town building thing isn't really my forte. Personally, it's just something that doesn't interest me, but I'll talk about it anyway. The town building in this game is very much like Fallout Shelter, or maybe Fallout Shelter is very much like the town building in this game, in the sense that you'll basically be going around managing 3 resources to make sure your town is kept in tip-top shape. You'll be building resources for food, water, and of course maintaining the common defense. Of course, this has a lot more functionality than just the stuff in Fallout Shelter. It has the new generator power kind of system. You can custom build your new buildings from a variety of different parts with a varying amount of functionality, and you can also customize your very dweller themselves with what they wear, what they're going to wield, and what position they are in. You can assign them to defend the town, work on farms, or to a variety of different crafting stations. I am not really interested in what it is for what it is, but for what it is, it's pretty good. If you're kind of into this stuff, you're going to like it. It works well, it's got a good variety of different things to choose from, and there's good customization. The only thing I have a problem with is the fact that I can't give my citizens power armor. Why can't I give my citizens power armor? Paladin Dance can wear it, and I've got 3 of them, I don't need them all. Now, in the name of keeping things on track, we're going to go back to the main plot real quick and head out to Diamond City. However, as we make our way towards Diamond City, we come across a small little group of people you may have remembered from every other Fallout game that has ever existed, the Brotherhood of Steel. We come across Paladin Dance's little ragtag group of individuals, we talk to them for a little bit, and we go on a quest with Paladin Dance. I'm going to take this time to now go away from the main quest that we were just getting onto and talk about the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 4. If you've ever watched my Fallout 3 video, you'll know I was very, very critical of the Brotherhood in Fallout 3, because I think they were just a terrible, terrible dumbing down misinterpretation of what the Brotherhood always was. And I am happy to say that in Fallout 4, at first, they are a lot better. Their reasons for going into the Commonwealth are very Brotherhood ones. They're here to stop a bunch of people from abusing a technology that could hurt a lot of people. They are somewhat abrasive. They don't really care about outsiders too much, even though they are willing to hire them, but I'm going to just leave that one to be the desperation of Paladin Dance's situation, and overall, they're just a much better interpretation. It's more of an understanding than an interpretation of anything. The only problems I have with the Brotherhood creep in later on when they start to just become sort of a pandering faction, really. I kind of hit the nail on the coffin when you realize they start to try to bring back Liberty Prime, who I'm sure is only back because people liked him in Fallout 3. I would have preferred if they actually did something with, like, the Pridwin or something, or just did their own thing, but for some reason the Brotherhood of Steel in this game are bringing back Liberty Prime, which is just stupid beyond belief. Not even to mention the T60 power armor, which is literally just T45D with a couple of rivets nailed into it, given the best stats. And as far as my one nitpick for this video is gonna go, which I'm probably gonna have a few more than one, but where are all the paladins? It's just Dance. I have not seen one paladin in this entire game. I've seen plenty of proctors and lancers or whatever, but I have yet to see any paladins other than Dance. It's kind of weird. But, you know, aside from those final things, the Brotherhood of Steel in this game are a lot better than they were in Fallout 3. I kind of wish they were a bit more isolationist about it, which is, you know, that was one of the big things about the Brotherhood of Steel, is that they're xenophobic, they're isolationists, they don't want anybody touching their shit. And, you know, this one's not so much like that, but, I mean, hey, at least it's better than Fallout 3, and I'll take whatever I can get from Bethesda at this point. So, after our little detour with the Brotherhood of Steel, we go ahead through the Commonwealth Wasteland and make it to Diamond City. Once we get to Diamond City, we meet Piper, who helps us get inside the actual city itself. Once we're in Diamond City, Piper's younger sister tells us about Nick Valentine, who's a detective that she says can help us find Sean. But as it turns out, Valentine is missing, and we have to go find him in a nearby combat zone. Once we get into the combat zone, we have to blast our way through a few gangsters in their vault, but I want to just show you some footage to kind of highlight how linear this level, and frankly all of the levels in Fallout 4's interiors are. every level in this game is pretty much just a line. And it's kind of depressing to see that, considering that's not really what it always has been. Like, yeah, vaults used to be always lines back in Fallout 3 in New Vegas, but here it's really bad. Like, almost every interior dungeon is just a line. But anyway, after walking through our line, we finally get our way to Nick Valentine. Nick takes us on a little journey, and we finally make it back to his place in Diamond City to help work out the details on who took Sean. After a little bit of dialogue, we figure out it was a guy named Kellogg who took Sean, presumably, and we go out to find him by breaking into his house. Now, while we're still in Diamond City and we're not on a manhunt quite yet, let's talk about the radio station. Diamond City Radio, the new Radio New Vegas / Three Dogs thing this time around, is probably the weakest of all the 3 radio stations we've had in the past 2 games. The radio host is not in any way endearing. He is incredibly annoying, and I hate him. It's obvious they didn't have any good ideas on how to make a real radio host, so they just went with an awkward, shy kind of person, which they knew people would like because people feel bad for that kind of thing. But I really, really hate him. His personality is dull. His whole character is just that he's shy. That's it. There's nothing else to him. Beyond that, the radio songs are also pretty bad too. A lot of the songs on this radio station, I think like 9 of them, are either recycled from Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. One of them being from the Fallout New Vegas Europe TV hotspot. Yes, I do know that. I am that into this shit. And all the others being stuff like Civilization, Do the Impossible, things that we remember from the previous games. And I'd say about half of the songs that are new in some way incorporate radiation or uranium in some ham-fisted way into their lyrics to try to, I don't know, remind us that this is Fallout and things blew up. But back on the topic of the main quest, we go and invade Kellogg's house after getting the key, and then we get an entire mission dedicated to some dog meat pandering. We take dog meat to go sniff some cigars for a while, and then eventually we make it to Kellogg's place. We invade Kellogg's little base, kill all of his sins, then go inside, talk to him for a little bit, and then kill him. And while we're here, I kind of wanted to take a second to talk about Kellogg's character and the character of pretty much every NPC in this game overall. This game has a serious problem with one-note characters. A lot of these characters have just single-note personalities. They don't change or develop, and there's nothing else to them. Like Travis from the radio station being a prime example. He's just shy. There's nothing else to him. Piper is pretty much just a deep-digging journalist who goes around being a jerk to everybody. Preston Garvey likes the Minutemen. I don't know if you knew that. Dr. Lee is a bit uppity. Paladin Dance likes to share war stories. And Nick Valentine is a detective. Almost every character in this entire game can be explained through with one word, and they don't ever change. I have not seen any characters develop in any way throughout this entire thing. Especially not Kellogg, who's basically just a bad guy. He lives a bad guy, he starts off as a bad guy, and he dies a bad guy. He doesn't get any time to develop at all. The only semblance of character development I've seen so far is the fact that you can befriend your NPCs and they become a little bit more open-hearted to you. But other than that, that's it. And that's only, what, the 12 companions in the game? That's a very small number of NPCs to be doing this kind of thing. We learn from Kellogg that our son was taken by the Institute, and we have no idea where the Institute is. After killing Kellogg, we get a small piece of his brain and don't know what to do with it. Valentine says we should return to Diamond City and talk to Piper, because she is, quote, willing to rustle their tail feathers. We go back to Diamond City, and it turns out Piper doesn't know what to do with the brain. Nick, however, does have an idea on what we should do with it, and suggests we go to the memory den. This completes this current quest and grants me a level up. Now, I couldn't stall this forever, so let's talk about the leveling system in this game. Or else I'll just be perfectly honest, unprofessional about this. The leveling up system in this is a total load of horseshit. It does nothing different from the previous system except that it's less customizable and it's boring. All of the perks come in ranks that just increase the effect of it. Half of the perks are just what the skills did, chopped up into different things. All of the endgame perks are just stupidly overpowered. You get to make one decision every time you level up. You can just edit any of your special stats, meaning that what you pick at the beginning of the game is completely meaningless. You get level ups faster than a World of Warcraft player on crack. It's just a brain-dead, worthless system. It's like slightly, incrementally better than what Skyrim was, and Skyrim's leveling up was just as boring as this. I mean, like I just said, half of the perks aren't even perks, and half of the perk ranks are just increases of numbers, and that's it. You want an interesting example of a really good perk, Rifleman. It increases your semi-automatic rifle damage. Your two-handed light gun rifle damage, that's it. Oh, and how about Locksmith? It just allows you to unlock different locks. So fantastic. Like I said in my one skill video, this system doesn't do anything to fix what was actually wrong with the previous system. It just exists to simplify it, to cut it down at the knees, and to make it so that it's digestible by anybody. A friggin' infant could understand this system. Oh, and let me please make a point of proving everybody wrong when they said that this system would make your special stats actually meaningful. No, it doesn't. Our special stats do exactly what they did in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. They just now unlock perks. And unlocking perks isn't really that much of a significant thing considering you can do it literally whenever you level up. Also, they failed to actually balance the game any with this new system. Basically, they just switch which are the dumb stats and which are the best stats by giving Charisma all of the best perks and giving Intelligence all the shitty ones. It's not even like any of these perks even matter. Half the time, all the speech challenges just get you some more caps and there's barely any terminals or actual lockpicking that you need to do for anything. Almost all of the perks in the entire game just help you go around shooting people because that's what the whole game is. Like, every side quest is go here and kill 40 people or whatever. You can get repeating quests from Night Rise and fucking whatever, the black guy from the Minutemen, to just go out and kill people. I wouldn't even go as far as to call this an RPG leveling system because that's not what it is. It's just the Far Cry perk system lifted from Far Cry 3. That's what this is. Level up, gain more health, and get a perk point, and you use it to make your guns do more damage. That's the whole thing. There's no more awesome perks like regenerating life when you're out in the sun, or exploding with corrosive energy, or having your plasma arc in between people. There's none of that. Half of it's do more damage with these guns, and the other half of it's do more better stuff with this contextual action. And all of the perks that aren't that were just lifted from Fallout 3 and New Vegas. And I'm not even going to begin with the max level thing. That is just a catastrophe that I don't even need to explain. Basically, to keep things short, this is just a better version of the Skyrim leveling system, which was barely a leveling system to begin with. It does exactly the same thing as the Fallout New Vegas and 3 leveling system, except now, to actually do it with the same amount of efficiency as to throw level ups at you all the time to give you the same amount of perks. All of the perks being way less interesting and way more poorly designed because they didn't actually have to do anything with skills. They could just take all the skill stuff and adapt that into free perks. So instead of fixing the previous system and giving us even cooler new perks to deal with, we just have all the same shit we used to do, now compounded into this mess. All the perks you don't even get through leveling up. You get them through finding books. They're not even a part of the system. So yeah, it's a less efficient, dumbed-down version of the previous game. That's not even getting into all the RPG elements that are missing from this game. This is just the leveling system. Oh, and the super mutants in this game are just as bad as they were in 3. I'm just putting that out there before we get back to the main quest. Alright, so Piper doesn't know exactly what to do with the brain. Valentine does know when he tells us to go to the memory den in a nearby town called Good Neighbor. We go into the memory den and go into the memories of Kellogg, where we go through a Far Cry sequence to learn that the Institute uses teleporters to get in and out of the actual facility itself. We also learn about a certain Dr. Virgil, who went rogue from the Institute's bioscience department. We find Virgil in yet another set piece, the glowing sea. Now, in all fairness, I actually really like the way the glowing sea looks visually, but from a gameplay standpoint, it's not really that interesting. It's just a big field of radiation and rad scorpions. Virgil sends us on a mission to go kill a Corsair who has a MacGuffin in his head that we can use to find the Institute. We kill the Corsair at a place called Green Tech Genetics after tracking his radio signal, and then realize that we don't know anybody who can actually crack the coding on So Dr. Amani tells us that we should probably search for the railroad, considering she thinks that they might know what to do. The railroad's pretty easy, but it is a neat little quest, especially if you overthink it like I did and started searching apartment buildings for room A7. The railroad helps us crack the coding on the Corsair chip in exchange for the chip itself, and we can now join them. We can now join all of the major factions except for one in the entire game. The factions in Fallout 4 are a welcome re-edition, but I have to say they're not really as well done as Fallout New Vegas, considering you can join all 3 of the good ones at the same time, and then the bad one at the same time as all the good ones. And the very fact that there's a bad and good one is pretty bad. Vegas had a morally bad, quote-unquote, faction too, but I have to say I think I like Caesar's Legion a lot more than I like the Institute, especially because the way they get you to like the Institute is pretty... well, we'll get to that. And don't worry, we'll talk about your faction choices later on. You all know what I'm talking about if you've beaten the game. We'll talk about that later on. Now, I can't tell if you've noticed this or not, but this video has been dragging on for quite a while, so we're going to just go ahead and skip a little bit of the main storyline that isn't very important, and just go right ahead into the Institute. Don't worry, we're not missing anything important. Everything between here and then is just us crafting a few parts for one of the factions we choose. Now, think of all the cliched plot twists they could have thrown in here for the Institute, such as they're not so bad when you get to know them, and, well, another one we'll get to in a moment. The Institute's plot twist here is really not that well handled. It's pretty predictable. In fact, I predicted it in a Skype chat to a friend of mine, like a few weeks before the game released. Basically, the Institute isn't so bad if you get to know them, and that's pretty much the whole thing behind this bit of the game. Inside of the Institute, we're contacted by somebody known as the Father, who instructs us to go into an elevator, look at some trees, and then go find our son. Turns out this is not in fact our son, and in a very... And I'm just gonna be nice and say clever. Name change, it turns out that the father is actually the son. Whoa, guys, big twist here. Sean is actually alive, and he's the leader of the Institute, which I think everybody kind of saw coming from a mile away. We talked to Sean for a little while, and he gives us the choice of either joining the Institute or leaving it. Basically, this is choosing whether or not you want to do some of the Institute quests, or just try around the Institute a little bit and walk, or if you just kind of want to leave and go do one of the quests for the other factions. So from this point out, we basically get to choose a faction that we want to join and do some quests for them. We're going to be doing the Brotherhood of Steel side for all of this because frankly it's the only faction I can even care about anymore. The Brotherhood of Steel quests at this point aren't particularly interesting. It's just 2 fetch quests until we come back and finally arm up Liberty Prime, after which we're called up by Elder Max into the Pridwin to give us another plot twist. Turns out Paladin Dance is a synth of some description, which is totally not foreshadowed by the fact that he stays back at the military base mysteriously against all kinds of player interaction. We are then sent on a witch hunt to find Dance. We find him at an old army outpost where he insists that we kill him because he now knows that he is indeed a synth. You can either choose to execute him there or to talk him out of his execution, and frankly I'm going to talk him out of it because he's the only character I even care about anymore. Outside, we're met by Maxon, who knows exactly where we went somehow, and complains about us about synths not being people, and makes a bunch of good points about why the Institute is bad, for ordering that we kill Dance right there. Again, I'm going to talk Maxon down from this and allow him to just exile Dance instead of killing him, because again, he's the only character I care about. This entire scene is frankly one of my least favorite in the entire game. It's such a ham-fisted way to try to add some kind of moral complexity to the story of this game that it boggles my mind. Instead of making the Institute something people could actually get behind, they just make one of the more endearing Brotherhood characters a synth, and make Maxon some raging, mouth-frothing evildoer. Frankly, for me, all this conversation really did was give Maxon time to make more good points against the Institute. Frankly, this here also shows the weakness of Maxon's character. Basically, he just doesn't like synths, and he's a strong leader. That's pretty much it. It is all the development I've gotten out of his character through the entire process of playing through the game twice. But anyway, we save Dance's life, and we then report back to the Pridwin. At the Pridwin, we're given even more filler missions, which involve us going and killing the railroad. Now, I'll be honest, the interfaction relationships in this game, while they do exist, don't really make a whole lot of sense. The Brotherhood says that the railroad is some kind of threat to their immediate operations, even though we go in there with just a thing of scribes and initiates and shit stomp all over them. But apparently they have some computer which poses a great threat to us because it can make calculations, which, you know, is what a computer does. I do appreciate the fact that these interfaction relationships are there. It shows that Bethesda is learning from Obsidian. They're learning how to make better games, but still, they need to work on this and refine it. Anyway, the railroad goes down without much trouble, and we go back to the Pridwin. After we get back on the Pridwin, we go back to the Lance Captain. The Lance Captain issues us another filler mission to get Liberty Prime back online through the use of some other technical MacGuffin, which requires us to report to Proctor Ingram. Now, some of you might be saying, Mr. Caption, we've been doing quite a lot of the main quests. What about all the other stuff? And frankly, we've been avoiding all the side content because there isn't much to talk about. Almost every quest in this game is either a fetch quest or an extermination quest where you go out and kill a bunch of things. So much so that you can get repeating quests from Knight Rise, Preston Garvey, and Scribe Halen to do exactly that. Preston Garvey tells you to go kill a bunch of raiders to get a new workshop area, Knight Rise has you go out and kill a bunch of ghouls or mutants or something, and Halen just has you go out and collect a piece of technology. Well, it's true, not every single quest follows this formula. All the ones that don't are really short, like the Gilded Grasshopper, which is literally read a note, go fast travel to a grave. Or the one with the water purifier, where you have to go out, turn on 3 pumps, and kill 2 Mirelurks. As far as non-questing exploration side stuff goes, it's about as strong as it always has been. It's nothing special, nor is it anything that's absolutely terrible either. It's all pretty good. I haven't found anything that really sticks with me yet so far, except for like the Robot Raceway, but I'll keep looking, don't you worry. But anyway, to get back on track, we take a flight to a place called Mass Fusion. Oh, and on our way there, we get a turret segment. A fucking turret segment in a Fallout game. Making sure we get to Mass Fusion, go through some synths, grab some kind of core thing, come back out, fight the security system, fight more synths, and leave to return to the Pridwin. We're not actually going to do that because that'll pretty much wrap up the story for now, and instead we're just going to take a minute to wrap up some of the last business I have with this game. A long time ago in this video, you might remember that we had some New Vegas footage playing, and I said we'll get to some certain lost RPG mechanics later. Well, here we are, friends. Let's talk about all the things that have basically been stripped out of this game from the previous game. First off, there's no karma system. Now, this is frankly flip-flop for me, because I really didn't care about the karma system either way, and it wasn't really done very well, but still, having no replacement for it is what I have a problem with. Faction disguises have been removed from the game. While some people might have found these annoying in New Vegas, it would have been incredibly easy to fix them just by letting players make it not faction armor by defacing it, so they could just wear it whenever. There's there's no more traits. There's the obvious one, the skill system, which we already talked about. Party size of any description has been removed because now you're just limited to one companion at a time. Repair has been completely removed from the game in any sense, and while I think the repair system from New Vegas and 3 was just kind of boring and annoying, they could have at least found a use for it in this game, like repairing your power armor or something. And town and now faction relations are no longer shown to the player. They still kind of exist for the 4 major factions, but as far as town relationships go, they've been completely removed. Also going to take a second to gripe about weapon design in this game. Visually, that is. This whole weapon mod customization thing they have going is an interesting thing in concept, but frankly I don't think it works in practice. Fallout 4 has some 50 base weapons and 700 modification for these weapons, and I have to say visually it is very dull. I don't know about you, but I would have preferred to have like 700 actual different weapons with their own models and different unique visual stylings than have the exact same pipe rifle repeated 350 times with a different piece of wood attached to it. Also, how come unique weapons in this game don't have any unique models like they did in New Vegas? Basically, to keep these little gripes short, I'm so tired of seeing pipe rifles. Anyway, back to the main quest. Out of the way, we report back to the airport. We get another one of these MacGuffins and install it into Liberty Prime. We get a lovely pandering sequence where we walk with Liberty Prime and shoot people, just like Fallout 3. Then with Liberty Prime's help, we go in and break into the Institute. Fight our way through the Institute until we eventually meet Sean. Sean has cancer or something. The best thing we can do to actually save him is just have him give us a password to turn off some of the synths and allow more of the scientists to escape. Fight our way further into the Institute until we eventually find the fusion reactor, where we fight even more synths and install some kind of bomb onto the fusion reactor so that it explodes. And don't worry, just in case you ever felt bad about anything you did, you get a replacement Sean towards the end of the game. I mean, God forbid a player actually feels bad about their actions or lives with their consequences, right? Convince the new Sean to stay with us or not, and either way, Proctor Ingram will teleport us to the detonation range. And it's here that we get to see the Institute explode and close out the game. And with all of this, we finally get to the ending of the game. And I have to say, of all the things that I've complained about through this whole video, nothing in this burns harder than the ending. Think of all of the Fallout endings we've had up to this point. Most of the time, it's a huge slideshow showing us the effects of all our actions on every part of the wasteland. Every town, even minor groups, we get to know what happened to them. In this, the ending is a generic monologue that is barely affected by what we do. It's all based on just what faction we choose. You could go around and murder almost everybody in this game, everybody that you can. You can murder as many people as you can possibly find that are murderable, and it wouldn't do anything. You could help people build an entire empire in this, and it has no effect on the ending at all. The only choice that we're rewarded with knowing the actual consequences of is, did we join the Institute or did we join someone else? To just drive the nail into my back with this whole thing, the ending cinematic ends with War Never Changes going over the most pandering recreation of everybody's favorite vinyl from Fallout 3. After all of that, the game doesn't even have the common decency to just close it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm done. This is as far as I'm getting through this game. Played through Fallout 4 twice, once with the Railroad and once with the Brotherhood of Steel. I have done as much side content as I can stomach, and I can safely say I'm done. Here's where we get to my final thoughts on this whole thing. Fallout 4 is such a weird thing. I don't want to hate it as much as I do, but it just misses so many core Fallout elements that I can barely even quantify this as a Fallout game, let alone even an RPG. The game does bring with it some new good additions and fixes certain things, like the combat in this game is so nice. The AI is so much better, and the dialogue in this game is so much more well voice acted, but everything else about it, the story, the settlements, the lack of player freedom, the RPG mechanics, or hell, the lack thereof, are just so bad. I can't stomach any more of this. It doesn't even feel like a Fallout game. It feels like a Far Cry game adapted with a Fallout skin. It's like a better Far Cry. And Fallout is not a better Far Cry. It is leagues beyond Far Cry. Fallout has always been leagues beyond Far Cry. But this game just barely even isn't. It's the apex of the road Bethesda has been going down over the last 8 years. They've been numbing down their games until they all become child-proof, flavorless mush that tastes like everything else. The game is just so simplified and boring that I don't want to play any more of it. I have tried so hard to enjoy my experience with this, and at times I do, but I just can't anymore. I'm finding myself having fewer good times and even more gripes with this than any other Fallout game I have ever played. And the worst part of it is that I'm not even angry at this. I'm just disappointed, because if this game had just more freedom and allowed you to be more of an RPG character, if this was more of an RPG, it would have been great. But it's just not, Because Bethesda doesn't care about alternate paths, player freedom, or any kind of role-playing. They just want Fallout to be that franchise they sell you watches and shirts with. Because this game is just a shooter, it's not even an RPG anymore. It has practically no identity of its own. It feels like every game I've played in the last 7 years. And I want to know what happened. Because this is not something that just happens. There wasn't just a decision to make this game crap. There wasn't just a decision to make Skyrim crap. There couldn't have been. Bethesda, I want to have a heart-to-heart with you, okay? I don't hate you guys. I don't even dislike you. I'm just disappointed by you, because I know you guys can do better than this. I have played a better Bethesda game than this. Morrowind was so good. I loved Morrowind, but this is not you. It's like playing a game that was made by someone else entirely. It doesn't even feel like it was the same people who made this and a good game. In the event that anybody was ever worked at Bethesda, or anybody who just has ever worked in the gaming industry at all, or plans to work there, or works there now, sees this, please. Build RPGs. Stop catering to casuals. Nobody wants to play the exact same game over and over and over again, because that's what this feels like. It's bland. It's baby-proofed, flavorless mush. This game is like if a restaurant wanted to make it so that all of their meals could cater to everybody, so they stopped using any kind of exotic ingredients and they just started using staples like bread. And after so many servings, you just can't keep eating bread. Bethesda, please take a long, hard look at your history and go back to your roots. Look at what made Morrowind and even Oblivion so good and do that again. Go back to the days of trusting in your players. Give us the freedom to do what they want. Show us that you know we can handle things for ourselves. Allow us to screw up. Allow us to be heroes and monsters. Don't just show us set pieces for the entire game. Don't forsake the core mechanics of your game for some flavor of the day crap like the settlement building. Build something with an identity. That's something people will remember. The only thing people are going to remember this for is that it's Fallout. That's all this game has going for, is that it's Fallout. If this wasn't Fallout, it would just be the same game people have been making over and over and over again for the past 7 years. Bethesda, please. I am sick of not having any good AAA RPGs to play. You guys are the last company with the mindset and the resources to actually create good AAA RPGs in the modern day, because all the other companies are just producing crap like Battlefield. Even at this point, Dark Souls is getting stuck in a repeating cycle of making the same game over and over and over again. Please, Bethesda, go back to your roots. Make good RPGs again. That's all I ask. Stop catering to people who aren't your die-hard fans. And as my final message to you and the entire industry over this game, please, make good RPGs again. And those are my final thoughts about this game. Thank you everybody who has watched through this review. It has been such a long week making this. I am going to have to wait like 8 hours for this to render, but it's going to be all worth it. For those of you who may be coming here for Fallout content in the future, I don't know how much of that I'll be making. I plan on moving to another RPG franchise like Wasteland or Pillars, but I still plan on sticking with Fallout for a little while longer just in case anything interesting happens with this game's DLCs. But until next time, see ya.